Hello strategy gaming enthusiasts, my name is AlzaboHD, and in today's video we are going to RimWorld, everyone's favorite sci-fi holiday simulator. More specifically, we will seek to serve man and see if we can survive only on a carnivore diet of human hors d'oeuvres. Today, we're going to play a challenging scenario I've created to match the theme, in which we will explore the story of a cannibal exile who starts alone, without a home, and with a complete lack of technology, though we do start with some sapient snacks. To really make things spicy, we will also play with Randy Random and the first randomized character that we can find with the cannibal trait. Meet Rona Black, a hardworking nudist who can and is able to survive on the planet of Prion, a dry, miserable, and overly hot desert planet of cultured cannibals. Think Arrakis, but instead of spice, the flesh must flow, and the human armchairs must grow. Rona's story begins near the good Cockroach Mountains, where our hero was unjustly banished from the Pact of Bryka on account of his dietary preferences and Vorsapian religion. Rona was hungry, alone, and on the run on day one of his exile. Armed with only a slate club to zug zug and a meager supply of man meat, he'd have to haul his property across the barrens to the crossroads where he had hoped to build a home. First, he'd have to carry his sapient snacks, followed by wood and essential oils, to a happy hovel he hoped to hammer into the searing sands. He didn't like sand, it's coarse and rough and gets everywhere, but Rona was a seasoned treehouse builder, and lacking skin for a sleeping bag, he'd have to rough his first night on the ground. Over the course of several hours, he had succeeded in turning his house into a home, but his dwindling supply of human hors d'oeuvres had struck a nerve. You see, Rona had come down with the sickness and was in pain, but despite lowered lung function, he lived to see another day. Mr. Black and his remaining human snack would sleep through the night, but after a while he was spitting out bile. By the next morning his food was running low, but he at least had morning wood with which he could use to build a wall. Despite being a literal treehouse builder, Rona's skills did not pay the bills, and his final slab of unrefrigerated meat had succumbed to the heat. He would need a butcher's table to serve flesh fries, and, surprisingly, a band of guests had arrived, but these vegans didn't sell cold cuts. Our starving homeless Hannibal could hardly take on this human horde alone, but patience was its own reward. He had a trick up his sleeve, and was no stranger to danger. To the south of his house laid a rather conspicuous building, and Rona would leak this lab threat in an effort to convert his vegetarian invaders into tribal taters. Brave Sir Rona bravely ran away to bring his robot friend into the fray, but by the time he returned, most of his guests had already departed. Thankfully, they left him a gift, and one piece of meat had overstayed its welcome. Big mistake, mate. Rona allowed Ant and Robo to come to blows, and with the robot down, it was time to take our solitary guest back into town. Using the gracious gift of his guests, Rona ventilated his prisoner with arrows to the knee, chopped him into cannibal chop suey, and at last ate his first piece of personally sourced meat, as every human should. This leftover leather would one day serve as a fine skin suit or armchair, and Rona celebrated the occasion by streaking through town. But building a town is tricky without timber, and Rona was running out of wood. Without any resources, he'd have to opt for a sleeping spot away from the rotting meat, and it was now time to eat. This would be his last supper for quite some time, and it was time to dredge through the steel mines. As a Neolithic troglodyte, he knew nothing, but he did know how to create a research table, and came up with an idea to secure another snack. Those Cryo-Sleep caskets in the ancient lab from earlier might contain some calories, and Rona would come prepared. With a steel trap laid by the door and a second hole drilled through the hole, he fired an arrow into the darkness. This strategy surprisingly worked, and 2 frozen soldiers fell out from the freezer. Arrows were notched, bullets flew, and one of the grunts blew their kneecaps off, falling over Rona's trap. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, Rona used terrain to his advantage and took cover. Their advanced weapons were useless in melee range, and our deranged protagonist used his bow to blow a hole through Castamos, killing him more or less instantly. Stopping for a quick bite to eat, Rona looted his first gun and went on the run after the other wounded warrior. But Clome Star had fallen and couldn't get up, and despite Rona literally licking the blood from his wounds, he succumbed to a slow and painful death. Our cannibal was barely wounded and sated his starvation by eating the frozen men raw, followed by skinning off their leather to make a bed out of their faces, as is tradition. Summer was fast approaching, and Rona couldn't survive the heat without wood, a rare commodity on our desert planet. Our cannibal would thus plant cacti to eventually create primitive coolers, primitive on account of his Neolithic technology level. His cannibal cerebrum was so stunted by prionic parasites that he literally couldn't bang two rocks together, but he was more than capable of rescuing and dismembering a damsel in distress. Looks like meat is back on the menu, and another shipwrecked survivor meant that Rona could get his pry on. With technically 2 members in tow, he could now name his faction, and opted to name himself Cannibal Chief of the Tenderloin Tribe, and Overseer of the Crossroads Cafe. And his cafe demanded a bloody buffet, but as a cannibal, Rona's desire for only one animal meant that unwanted rodent visitors could not be served. It was hotter than hell at a brisk 53 degrees or 130 degrees Fahrenheit, and Rona had to dig in deeper into the mountain if he was to survive his flesh being fried. On the threshold of death itself, he cannibalized the wood of his walls, while the homicidal hamsters were asleep, netting him 50 logs to build a primitive cooler within the cafe's caves. After all, he lived to see another day, and retired to his human leather sleeping bag. Another day, another prey, and with the planet of Prion literally raining men, Rona could make ends meet. He had Hoj over for dinner and some fisticuffs and chill, and though he had no beef with her, served her all the same.
Male fantasy?
After his midnight snack, food poisoning had come back, but our protagonist would be prepared for any future meals on wheels. Apparently, the other cannibal clans of this cursed hellscape also lacked brain cells and burned themselves to death, but those that did come to dine at the Cannibal Cafe had their knees blown off by Rona's trap card and a light peppering of machine gun. One homeless wanderer, Kaisuke, was so inspired by Rona's defenses that he demanded to join the Tenderloin tribe. There are 2 types of people in this world, those who eat and those who dig, and Kaisuke was not entitled to the sweat of Rona's brow. This thrall of our cannibal king brought back beers and wanted to crack open a cold one, which was ironic given that he died of overheating. Kaisuke could die happily knowing that he served a greater purpose in death than in life. And it's important in life to throw away that which gives you no pleasure, and Rona embarked to downsize his collection of cadavers, but eating raw tendies rendered him irritable and depressed. Thankfully, help was on its way in the form of refugees and complimentary customers. One hobo, Haruka the Homeless, even helped tenderize the tribal invaders into tribal taters, but she too was running too hot and her body cooked itself into a human hot pocket. The coast was finally clear, but Rona's blood loss was severe, and he opted to drown away his pain by eating the chick he had filleted, consuming it all in balance and moderation.
And speaking of a balanced diet, this video is sponsored by Ground News. Ground News is an online media analysis website and application that allows you to reveal the reliability, political bias, and ownership of news outlets, so that you can see the real story behind the scenes. Let's take this article of mystery meat as an example. This purported story has the New York Times putting people first, but if you look to the right side, we can see that of the 21 agencies reporting this story, 20 of them are right-leaning. There's more than meets the eye, and even Alex Jones of InfoWars fame is in the game. But the headlines are very different depending on the news outlets that report them. Ground News displays the time, location of sources, levels of factuality, and a high level of ownership data so that you can analyze fact from fiction. You can try Ground News for free and support ya boy, AlzeboHD, by visiting ground.news/AlzeboHD and subscribe to get unlimited access and solve the mystery behind the media meat.
Back on the ground, a refugee by the name of Kairatsa had arrived, and instead of serving her as fries, her skills were better suited towards science. Rona rolled out the welcome mat by fashioning her very own sapien-skinned sleeping bag, but not everyone had the stomach for the paleo diet. Kyra was unhappy with her lot in life and wasn't accustomed to being served tribal tartare, but together as a team, our Vorsapien nation would go far. And speaking of Vorsapienism, Rona realized that the Holy Bible of Humanivores was nearby, and he would stop at nothing to obtain the relic of how to serve man. Up until now, his preparation and presentation had been sloppy, with cold cuts often containing leaded alloys, but the discovery of how to slap rocks together was a scientific breakthrough. Rona would celebrate by fashioning out flesh suits for that dermal drip, because who isn't happy with wearing the suffering of others? Women, apparently. Rona was hungry like the wolf, but as a cannibal, he desired only one animal, a more specific sort of mammal. Back at home, Our Lady was as silent as the lambs and fell into a cannibal-induced catatonic coma. She was unable to move or speak, but she telepathically communicated her desire to leave the Crossroads Cafe, and this simply could not stand. There was no mystery to the meat Rona would consume for dinner, and yet another beggar came looking for handouts. This was a cafe, and not a charitable place to stay, but hungry hobos would not go away. There was no delivery fee, and this 4-course meal was complimentary. Thankfully, another intellectual, Chris, joined the colony, but Chris had a burning desire to light a fire, and while Rona was hunting the most dangerous game, he had set aflame the cannibal caves. Stop right there, criminal scum, no one breaks the law on my watch. He was arrested, the flames were fanned, and Rona reluctantly released this raving lunatic. But psychopathy never changes, and when Chris lit another fire, the two men would beat each other unconscious while spooning in the searing heat. Once recovered, a wall would be built and the cacti would pay for it, while locally sourced skins shored up our defenses. Soon afterwards, a bloke by the name of Benny had joined our team, and thankfully lacked any burning desires, which meant that Chris could be fired. In keeping with tribal tradition, his corpulent corpse was transformed into Soylent salami, but the cafe's meat reserves were running out fast. In an effort to survive, Benny and Rona opted to embark on a cannibal quest, and for the first time left their home in search of other people to meet. Our hero's journey was long and hard, and largely consisted of Benny running away from Rona's homicidal rage. This Prion-powered protagonist was uncontrollable and beat the meat out of the tribesmen of the town, and despite his severe malnutrition, kept up the hunt for Benny. Ben was able to duck and dodge, and even scored a quick snack before Rona came back. Our tribe's newest member was forced to bludgeon Rona to save him from starvation, ultimately force-feeding him the flesh of his previous prey. This town was thankfully the former home of fellow cannibals, and their cages kept a vast collection of corpses. These gibbet cages were opened, and the structures were dismantled to get wood to build a butcher's table. Any excess wood was used to create defensive fortifications, while leather was used to create the best defenses of flesh and skin. With traps in place, it was time for the fun to begin, and thus Rona hacked the terminal to bring all the tribesmen to his yard. 1,000 nations of the cannibal clans descended upon our tribe, and wave after wave would meet their creator. More and more bodies were hitting the floor, and the levees were breaking under a hail of bullets. With Benny injured and the fort falling apart, our sidekick's sanity broke down, and he toked up a spliff while somehow simultaneously dodging arrows and bullets. It was high time to get out of here, and taking a prisoner, 300 stacks of human leather, and more meat than they could possibly eat, our Tenderloin tribe hit the trail. Benny, while infected, wouldn't die from dysentery, but on their return, ravenous rats were on the attack. A mysterious man in black had arrived to save the day. The rats were blown away, and Benny was rescued and nursed back to health. Unfortunately, Rona was far worse for the wear and had an infected ear, and ironically, the savior of our tribe was also infected by the rat attack, and even worse, he had asthma. His death was inevitable, and he was given a funeral in accordance with the traditions of our people. Rona's infection was threatening to send him down the same path, and thus drastic measures had to be taken. Despite a complete lack of medical training, Benny was entrusted to amputate his ear, and it worked. Rona would live to see another day. Weasel was enslaved and bade to mine away, and 2 forlorn vagrants were invited to our cafe. They weren't the keenest on our lean cuisine, and when incited into a rage, were permitted to beat each other to death. The survivor was shot and slain, their bodies rawly reframed, and other survivors were rescued and barbecued for the greater good. This was a beggar's banquet, and Rona and Benny banded together to hunt the homeless population to sustain their Vorsapien nation. When the rations got low, they would get groceries outside of town, and became nefarious for putting people first. On one such escapade, they captured Shrew, a teenaged mastermind, and had this captured convict carry over 500 slabs of fresh flesh back to the base. But without refrigeration, this human haul would not last long, which gave our tribe an idea. From henceforth, the Tenderloin tribe would spare no effort in taming the scientific Shrew into their traditions. Future meat was to be shared 3 ways. Resistance to conversion would be futile, and customers to our cafe would serve as Shrew's personal buffet. In a short span of time, he became Vorsapien, though he wasn't always happy to be surrounded by rotting flesh. To lift his spirits, Rona and Benny constructed human leather armchairs, and after some persuasion, the Shrew was tamed and quickly took to the tools of our trade. He would come to enjoy his Vorsapien vêtements, and work soon began on ritualistic flesh chambers to honor our religion. From this altar, Rona was declared Cannibal King, flesh pillows were fabricated, and the tribal team set off to restock their wares. They came, they saw, and they sat down for dinner, returning with enough human leather to trick out the tribe with dermal dusters. Unfortunately, an attack by a rabid wolf pack led to several setbacks, but on the bright side, our first oven came online, and dinner time now boasted sizzling flesh fries. With the support of the Shrew, our tribal team now had electricity, and despite lacking a refrigerator, constant raids rendered such a device unnecessary. When news of a cannibal colleague being chased about by raccoons reached the cafe, Rona decided that help was on its way. Luckily, our new dermal defenses meant the raccoons were kept away, and after resisting arrest, Takumi was taken down a notch when his leg was literally beaten off. This heathen savage believed in female supremacy, which was problematic in our sausage fest fiefdom, but he too would see the light of Kuru. Our crack team of medical experts set about rebuilding his leg with a wooden peg, and if at first you don't succeed, try again. Takumi's former faith in feminism would have to be broken down. Visitors to our town were shot down, and our cannibal king had converted the convict. Takumi was now a free man, and with air conditioning online, future trips to the supermarket meant that our produce could be preserved. His social skills made Takumi the most eligible bachelor for the role of bloody priest, and it was beyond time to construct a freezer for our fair trade flesh. Our newly built wooden generator ensured that our meat would no longer expire. Work started on constructing more bedrooms, and a paying customer was invited to the kitchen. Say hello to hell, sucka, and prepare for trouble, as our stomachs won't feed themselves. Together as a team, we had made ends meet, but other sources of eats were strictly haram. Hey Jude, welcome to the cafe.
I wrote a blog post a while ago about
We would love to meet your forlorn friends, particularly Rona, who's dying to meet you. Shrew's discovery of solar panels meant that energy was now unlimited, much like our produce, which attracted the finest connoisseurs this side of the Cockroach Mountains. Human-sourced hats were now the latest fashion. Food had never been so plentiful, and Rona's team set out for an ancient complex rumored to contain the secrets of their holy text. Unfortunately, it also happened to be booby-trapped, and though the relic's location was found, Rona was literally burning alive on the ground. Of course, it didn't help that it was literally 69 degrees outside, or 150 degrees Fahrenheit in freedom units, and our friends in need had an extraction team to come and save them. They would need time to cool off, but the fact they survived was a cause for celebration. A cannibal platter was fashioned into a feast, and everyone appreciated the chance to relax, and a wanderer by the name of Rowan was attracted by this prospect of snacks. We'd first need to clean up this place to welcome our new Sapien member, especially considering that bugs had sullied our sacred halls. Elsewhere, a source of new armchairs had arrived, skulls were secured for the skull throne, and our merry gang of corpse connoisseurs made off for the location of their holy scripture. Of course, this location was filled with disgusting, unedible machine men, but after they were dismantled, Rona was able to break into the reliquary. At long last, the Tenderloin tribe had obtained guidance on how to serve man, and, with text in hand, journeyed across the barrens and back to the crossroads. Our human horde needed our own shrine with which to place this fine scripture, and renovations were thus carried out to create such a place. And speaking of our base, livestock pens were created, complete with a Soylent Green machine to comfortably accommodate future guests. Naturally, they made beautiful bedrolls. When news arrived that Allah and her friends wanted to crash the cafe, Rona was naturally swayed. She would make for a fine piece of furniture, and when halal said and done, her friends were ready to have some fun. Allah had many friends, and with friends like these, who needs enemies? Surprisingly, our tribe could sit back and relax as these raiders fought World War III with sticks and stones and clubbed themselves to death. By the time help could arrive, there was little more than skulls to pop and bodies to recover, though this haul would cover all of our dietary needs for the coming fall. And that's not all, as a royal stellarch wanted to pay our famous cafe a visit on behalf of the Empire. Little would he know that this was a one-way ticket, though he quickly realized something was wrong. Our tribe bade this royal visitor to have a taste of our signature dish, which was fun for the entire family, no refunds, but our attention was divided and a raid broke into base undefended. The situation was dire, and Rowan was on fire, but after justice was meted out, our guests had naturally bloomed into beautiful leather curtains. Those that survived were shown to their accommodations and were encouraged to break a leg, fed on a sustainable source of Soylent Green, and fought like animals for a chance to become a cannibal. After more than a year of work, our sandstone shrine was looking fine, and how to serve man was now in sacred hands. Rowan would use this to guide his passion of anatomy into the culinary arts, and ripped out Sarah's heart, a fortunate event considering that a black market ship was in the market for our wares. But back at the other market, things were not going well, and Shrew fell ill with an infection. Alas, our collection of confections were sizable, but so too was Shrew's infection, and at the old age of 18, his soul had passed into heaven. So long, Shrew, and thanks for all the flesh. In 5503 AD, the Tenderloin tribe was thriving with a sustainable source of food, stocks of livestock, and an exceptionally crafted flesh chambers with human leather drapes, human leather pillows, human leather sleeping bags for guests, and over 2,000 stacks of conflict-free tapestry. Our reliquary was home to the cannibal Bible known as How to Serve Man, and thanks to child labor, the late Shrew had unlocked enough technology for our previously Neolithic tribe to enter into the modern era. Our cannibal capital was ruled by the randomly generated Mr. Black Rona, the cannibal king, and our original character. The walls and halls were largely constructed by Benny Blanco, our architect extraordinaire, while we were spiritually guided by Takumi, the bloody priest and lead chef. Rowan was basically better than Benny in every way, but lacked seniority, so a servant he would stay. All of our tribesmen were kitted out in human leather hats, rags, and dusters, and to be honest, most of us are missing fingers, ears, legs, and lungs like a bunch of prion-infested pirates. Our livestock are raised ethically in an enriching environment, complete with access to Soylent Green derived from their friends and family. Our industrial capacity boasts gun workshops, an arts and crafts corner, and souvenirs from fallen foes, while all of our furniture is furnished in flesh. Perhaps you too would like to visit the Crossroads Cafe, in which case I invite you to Prion Planet, just west of the Good Cockroach Mountains. Over 2 in-game years have passed since we've started this campaign, and though it took dozens of hours to play and produce, it was honestly very fun to play RimWorld, and I invite you to let me know in the comments below if you'd like more of this game for a future campaign. Before ending this video, I'd like to thank you for watching this far, and if you'd like to see more meaty mockumentaries, slap the like button and slice into the subscription box. This video was sponsored by Ground News, and I invite you to check out the description box and pinned comment to find out more information. But if you want to help me fund a future editor so that I can make these more than once a month, please consider donating to my Patreon, or donating basic attention tokens to Alzabo HD through the Brave browser. It was a pleasure to meet you all, and it's time now to roll the credits.